Hey, what's up guys, TechTine here, and this is the long-awaited final review of the Motorola Moto G 5G 2023 model. So I legit spent as much time with this phone as I could as my daily driver to give you guys a proper full review. But a phone isn't really a phone without a proper wireless service, which is where Mint Mobile comes in play, and this is who I'm partnering with for today's video. And if you ever thought to yourself, why is my wireless bill so high? Then let me tell you a little bit about Mint Mobile. You might already know Mint Mobile if you've seen these funny ads from Ryan Reynolds, who's also an owner, but let me quickly tell you how awesome their service is. Mint Mobile basically offers premium wireless service for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online, which means that they cut out the middleman, which are the retail stores and salespeople. So why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? Click the link in my description or scan the QR code if you're interested in the best value in wireless. So all Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, plus lightning fast 5G and free mobile hotspot. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. And I've been personally using Mint Mobile on my daily phone, and I legit could not tell the difference between Mint Mobile and the service provider that I used to have. So whenever I use it to browse the web, get on my social media, watch my YouTube videos, I legitimately could say that without a doubt this has been a solid service. And now as a special limited time offer, you can actually get their unlimited plan, which is normally only $30 a month for just $15, and that is basically a 50% savings off their already super low price. It only takes up to 15 minutes to pay as low as $15 a month for your phone plan. It really is that simple. So yeah, use the link in my description or scan the QR code. It really helps out the channel as well, and it is much appreciated. Alright, so the way that I'm going to be doing this review is by dividing it into a couple of categories: design, display, specs, camera, and price. So obviously we have to begin and talk about the design, and this is such a subjective topic, but in my opinion this phone actually improved upon the previous generation Moto G 5G. One, the back has a kind of a flatter look, and if anything it actually looks more modern than the previous generation. So the back does also have this kind of soft fake sandstone, really slippery material. So a case is definitely highly recommended, but overall the way that it looks actually pretty decent, and it actually looks really similar to the OnePlus Nord N300, and I'll leave a video for that in the description so you guys can take a look. And if you look at the way that they also designed the camera lenses or the camera housing itself, it actually follows a similar story to the overall design, so that's a nice touch by Motorola. Speaking of the camera, you do have a dual camera sensor with a 48 megapixel main camera, LED flash, but we'll definitely talk about the camera in that segment of the video, so stay tuned. But the camera does protrude a little bit, which can get annoying, but if you have a case then it shouldn't be a big deal. And the edges are as flat as can be, so definitely something to keep in mind. And the sides, the ridges, they're squared off, which provides a better grip. Now my one complaint when it comes to the design is the button placement, and I talked about that in my impressions. They're placed really high, which was kind of not that comfortable if you're trying to use this phone with one hand, when you're trying to access your volume buttons or like your fingerprint sensor or your power button in general. So yeah, that's also something to note. So as far as your IO port goes, you do have a 3.5mm headphone jack, which is weird to see in 2023, but hey, it's there if you need it. You also get a microphone as well as a fast charging USB-C port and your bottom facing speaker, but this actually does have a dual speaker setup where you have the bottom speaker and the earpiece speaker that act together, but we'll take a listen to the speaker later on in the video. Overall though, as a design, I have to say this: it's definitely a different approach from previous generation Motorola devices, and definitely something to kind of a refreshment if you ask me. Yeah, it looks like a familiar design because it kind of does mimic the OnePlus Nord N300, but it is what it is at that point. I'm just looking at this phone in a vacuum, and I'll tell you this, that the design refreshment is actually something good. So yeah, overall as far as design, I'm satisfied. Now let's switch the topic of conversation and talk about the display, and this is where things can get a little bit disappointing. So hear this. I complained about the display in a couple of videos that I did. I'll leave them linked in the description below. But basically you do have a 6.5 inch 1600 by 720p. Yeah, that's right. only a 720p panel, so it does have a 270 ppi density. However, the fact that it's just a 720p panel is really disappointing, I must say. It's 2023, I get the price of the phone, but I feel like they could have added a 1080p display. Other than that, this display is actually pretty decent. So it is an IPS panel that is actually fairly good in quality. So colors are nice, they're vivid, they're sharp. So the display colors are nice, they're calibrated very well, and you can control a couple of things in the settings. But the upright feature that comes with this display is the fact that it does have up to 120 Hz refresh rate. You do get three options. You can either put it in auto, where it would determine which refresh rate to use in a certain task, so you can have it in 60 Hz, or just keep it at 120 Hz. Me personally, I did keep it at 120 Hz. I might as well take advantage of it since they skimped out on the resolution. And you can control a couple of things in the display, like the saturation, whether you wanted to keep it at a natural colors. You can control the warmth, the cool of the cool colors or the warm colors of the display, so that's something nice. As far as viewing your content and watching videos, I found it to be fairly decent. I didn't really have any trouble with it. Again, resolution is low, and I also feel like the peak brightness on this phone is not the best that I've seen. But overall though, listen, it's not too shabby. So here, take a listen to the speaker and I'll tell you a couple of things about it. Phone, I think it gives it a good look in my opinion. So on the back you also have a triple camera setup, with the main sensor being a 50 megapixel sensor, and you also have two additional cameras, one that would act as a 2 megapixel macro and the other one would be a 2 megapixel depth sensor. More on the camera later on in a little bit as well, but basically the way that this camera fits in within the design of the phone is actually really good. I think Nokia did a decent job in that regard. So if anything, the speaker kind of saves the display just a little bit. Not too much though, not too much. So the speaker on here is actually pretty good, and in my opinion it does beat out phones at a similar price point or even higher price point. So I've heard worse speakers from phones priced at a higher than a $199 price tag. So yeah, you can say that this kind of saves the display. So far the design and the speaker are pretty good. The display is 50-50. So now let's actually discuss the camera experience on this phone. So this phone provides you with a dual camera setup, where the main sensor is a 48 megapixel f1.7 aperture wide camera lens, and you also get a 2 megapixel f2.4 aperture macro sensor. So you do have the ability to shoot 1080p at 30 frames per second as far as video capability on the main sensor, and you also have a 8 megapixel front facing camera with f2.0 aperture, and you also have the ability to shoot 1080p at 30 frames per second on the front facing camera. So there are limitations when it comes to this camera sensor, right? So no 60 frames per second recording of videos, no 4K video of course. That's to be expected at a phone at this price point. I do have to say this about the camera interface. So I like it, but there are some things that are questionable, but they can be fixed with a software update. One of the things that I like about the camera experience here in the camera app itself is the fact that it takes pictures pretty seamlessly. So really quick at taking pictures, or even transitioning between the main sensor and the macro sensor, or even transitioning between the photo, video, front facing camera. So all these stuff are great, and the phone does a pretty good job at it. Now the thing that kind of annoys me about this camera app is the lack of detail in the settings, right? I get simplicity and I actually love simplicity, but this is almost, the settings area is kind of too simple, right? Meaning, if you go to the video section of the camera settings, you can see that it has the option to switch to efficient videos. But what does that mean? Does it mean that it's switching to 720p or 480p? What is efficient in their eyes is? So I wish there was a little bit more detail in that regard, but that's just something that I'm nitpicking about. And you do have a couple of options in the setting, like quick capture, and of course the shake the phone twice to launch the camera app, which is really cool. But now let's actually discuss the image quality. So the 48 megapixel sensor, when it comes to good lighting condition, it does what it does best, right? It tries its best to kind of give you a overall decent picture. In some situations it can be overexposed. However, I do have to say that the macro sensor is absolutely horrible. But I'll get to that point in a little bit. But as far as your portrait shot goes, It's decent. It does a pretty good job in focusing, but not the best. So there are some areas that are still not in focus. And if you take a picture with an object that has details in it, the picture will come out sharp and it will actually come out pretty decent, sharp, vivid. So all those good things that come with the camera in good lighting conditions are there. And one of the things that surprised me about this phone is that the dynamic range is actually pretty good for a phone at this price point. Now, indoor photography is obviously going to take a hit, so it's not going to be the best kind of producing pictures in artificial light, but a lot of phones at this price point still take a hit. Back to that macro sensor real quick. It's absolutely garbage if you ask me. So the colors are not right. It just doesn't look right. It's just not a good macro sensor. And here's a kind of sample of the video capability of this phone. Moto G 5G 2023 model. So really quickly, this video capability only shoots up to 1080p at 30 frames per second. So not the greatest video quality of all time, but it does have digital stabilization, so it kind of helps. Hey, what's up guys, TechTime here, and this is the video test of the front-facing camera on the Moto G 5G 2023 model. So as you guys can see, it lacks a lot of things when it comes to the front-facing camera. Specifically, the shutter speed seems to be a little slow, so I'm not going to judge it too harshly. I'll put it to my computer, see how it looks like. Alright, we out. So as far as the video quality on the main sensor, it actually kind of looks like a upscale 720p. So not really the sharpest thing in the world, but for $199, it does the job. The front-facing camera, the video capability on that is actually not as bad as I thought it was going to be. So take that with a grain of salt, and then you tell me what you think of the camera experience. If you have this phone, let me know what you think of the camera quality, leave it in the description. But based on what you've seen, what do you think as far as camera capability? Obviously, it's not going to be the best because this is more targeted towards people that are not trying to spend $1,000 towards a phone. But more on that in the conclusion. Okay, so yeah, that's basically what sums up the camera experience on this phone. Now let's flip the page and talk about performance. Alright, so here's your spec sheet. So this phone does have an octa-core chip where 2 of the cores are clocked at 2.2 gigahertz. You also have 6 cores that are clocked at 1.6 gigahertz. And the chipset of choice is going to be the Snapdragon 480 Plus 5G. So obviously this is targeted towards low to kind of mid-range phones. And you also get 4 gigabytes of RAM, a 128 gigabyte of storage if you get the unlocked version, but if you get the carrier associated version, for whatever reason, it is stuck at 64 gigs. So that's also something to keep in mind. As far as your GPU goes, you do get the Adreno 619 GPU. So overall, as far as the specs go, again, you can tell who this phone is targeted towards. Now obviously, if you want, I would recommend getting the unlocked version. I know the carrier version, they do give out nice discounts, so you can get this phone for like $100, sometimes even like $50. But in my opinion, if you want more storage, go ahead and cop the unlocked version. As far as my benchmark scores, so this one did score a single core of 736 and a multi-core of 1658. And if you think about it, it actually lines up pretty decently between this phone and the Galaxy A14. So I feel like that would be a fun comparison, even though I kind of know which one's going to come out on top. But as far as the performance, this is where this phone kind of lies in. So hey, it's not the worst, but it most definitely not the best performing phone for this price point. As far as my daily experience with performance, I found it to be pretty consistent and pretty good. Launching apps, doing the basic tasks, it's going to be fast, it's going to be quick, and that's also thanks to the 120 hertz refresh rate. So again, the performance, it may not, be an outclass leading performer, but it does the job well. Even when it comes to playing games, I did play a couple of games here and there just so I can see how far I can push it, and it did fine. I didn't really, obviously it's not going to be the highest resolution, it's not going to be the best refresh rate, but it played games as smooth as you could get as far as the specs go. So it definitely didn't have a lot of issues in that regard. And you also get a large 5000 milliamp hour battery that actually does a pretty good job in battery life. Yeah, if you're playing games, you are going to be waiting longer for the game to load than phones with higher chipsets, but that's just a sacrifice that you're just going to have to make. But as far as the experience goes, again, when playing games, it was fairly decent. Alright, so basically the specs overall, they get they get a thumbs up from me. All right, for a phone at this price point, they get a thumbs up from me. Now, speaking of the price point, this is going to be the next topic of conversation. So, at $199 unlocked, this phone gives you a lot of what you need, right? There's no reason for you to spend $1,000 on phones if you don't have to. But then again, we're living in a kind of a really competitive market where you can get a lot of nice budget phones for 200 bucks. For example, the Galaxy A14 is a competitor. Even I can go as far as spend the extra 50 to 100 bucks, get you the Pixel 6a. That's a tough one to beat, right? So overall, the price and the conclusion of this video kind of sums up the point of saying that I would want to recommend this phone, but I can't. One, it has a lackluster display. So the display is unforgivable. Phones at this price point will give you a 1080p panel. So that just makes it a tough buy as far as the resolution of the display. And the display is the main thing that you look at in a phone when you're using it, right? So you better have some sort of a decent display. The camera on here, it's kind of average for the price point. It's not going to be groundbreaking or anything like that. But as far as the design goes, it's definitely an upgrade from last year. So last year's generation, we did get two models, one with a 720p display and one with 1080p. I wish Motorola would have done the same thing. That way they give you more options to choose. And then the ball would kind of be in your hand to see which one you would want to pick. But in my opinion, it still is an upgraded phone from last year's generation. If you have the 2022 Moto G 5G, it still is a hard to recommend just because they did upgrade some things as far as the design goes, but everything else, it seems to be kind of the same. Yeah, you get 120 hertz refresh rate display, but so what? With a low resolution, I don't think that 120 hertz really helps it as much as it should. But with that being said, let me know what you guys think of this phone. Do you think that you would buy it, you would consider it, or what other options do you have that are kind of competitive to this phone? So let me know in the description below. I really do greatly appreciate all my viewers, my subscribers, so that's definitely appreciated, and I will definitely catch you guys in the next one. All right, stay tuned, more videos are coming.